Abortion law in the US is a big debate. In most Western countries now, it's more or less settled that the right to a safe abortion is a fundamental human right for all women. But it's still very much up for debate in the US, and because of the fact that the US has a federal system where individual states have a lot of power over their own affairs, it means that some much more socially conservative states, like Texas, end up implementing laws to try and restrict abortion. But in the 1970s, the Roe v. Wade judgment by the Supreme Court basically enshrined the right to a safe and legal abortion into law across the state. However, it looks like Texas has essentially done something that is now unconstitutional because of Roe v. Wade. And the Supreme Court is refusing to block that new law. So this new law in Texas is called Senate Bill 8, and it bars abortion after a fetal heartbeat can be detected, which is usually around 6 weeks into a pregnancy. It's been described as the most restrictive abortion law in all of the United States. And that by the New York Times, and it is a very draconian measure. The law allows private individuals to sue violators of this ban on abortion after a fetal heartbeat can be detected, usually around 6 weeks of a pregnancy. Anyone who assists prohibited abortions can be sued, and plaintiffs are entitled to $10,000 in damages. The law makes no exceptions for pregnancies resulting from incest or even rape. Supreme Court precedents forbid states from banning abortion before a fetus would be viable outside the womb, usually around 22 to 24 weeks. So this is blatantly a violation of the United States Constitution, or at the very least, some form of federal law, and the Supreme Court is doing nothing about it. So, first off, let's talk about why this is such a horrific measure. This will not stop people getting abortions. It won't. Because when someone has been a victim of a heinous crime, like rape or incest or something like that, and they get pregnant because of it, or even if they just really can't look after the child, or something like that, they're going to want to get an abortion. It's not going to stop them. They're just going to have to go to far less safe routes to get that abortion, right? So you don't stop abortion with this. All you do is you increase the risk to the mother, and you significantly increase the amount of shame that is cast down onto these women who really are just doing what they feel is best for their own body, right? Another point that it's worth saying is a fetus with a heartbeat at 6 weeks old is not a human being in the same sense that a fetus at 25 weeks is. It's just not the same thing at all. You know, the changes in the sophistication of the fetus's brain and its nervous system and its limbs and every single part of its anatomy and biology, it's just, there's such a massive difference. The scale is enormous. And of course there's very, very limited, if any, brain activity at that time. So it does seem really rather strange, because if someone gets an abortion at that time, a lot of the time they don't even know that they have, that they're pregnant. It's absolutely ridiculous. And as a man, I do feel like it's kind of ridiculous that we even get much of a say on this. I mean, you know, we're allowed to have an opinion on it, of course. We live in a free democratic society, but it's not really, it's women and their bodies. Why should we get a say over that? It seems a bit strange to me. You can have an opinion on it, but it doesn't mean that you should be part of the legislative body that decides what goes on in a woman's own anatomy, in her own body. It's just bizarre. And then, of course, there's the fact that the Supreme Court isn't going to do anything about it. Now, why on earth would the Supreme Court not do that? First off, it's clearly the right thing to do, but even if they weren't really against it, for it on moral grounds, surely they would stop it because it violates federal law. No, they're not going to do that because the court is dominated by far-right conservatives that were appointed by, some of whom were appointed by Trump, like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. These people do not care about women's rights. They don't care about healthcare, and they certainly don't care about ordinary Americans. They will not act in a way that preserves and upholds the Constitution of the United States or federal law because they don't care. It's as simple as that, you know, and that's the case in a lot of developed countries at the moment. People in positions of power and influence and tremendous wealth and things like that just don't care. And we have become very, very kind of numb to this idea that it's, oh, well, they're just not going to do their job. You know, oh, politicians are liars. Oh, the Supreme Court's just only going to do things that politically they agree with. They're not going to be impartial when it comes to upholding the Constitution. Oh, well, that's just how it is. No, we shouldn't accept that. Absolutely not. And it's disgusting that is the reason that this horrific law is going to get put into place to stay there. Joe Biden has said that he is going to fight it. You know, a lot of Democrats in the House and the Senate have talked about that. But whether or not they're actually going to fight, or if they're just going to say they're fighting, whether they're going to walk the walk rather than just talking the talk, I don't know. You know, I mean, I had a very low opinion of Joe Biden when he won the Democratic primary, and even when he won the presidency. But given his recent, you know, sticking to his guns regarding Afghanistan and making sure that he definitely brought all the troops home, I do have a little bit of faith that he will fight, and he will actually stick to his word rather than, you know, capitulating. But who knows, man? Who knows? But look, maybe you do think that for whatever reason, even in circumstances of incest and rape, that abortion should be totally illegal, and you think for some reason other people, other than that individual woman, should have a say about such an intimate and important detail. So let's say all that is the case, right? You do support these so-called pro-life policies about restricting abortion because you genuinely think that you want to protect unborn children, even if they're a 6-week-old fetus. You want to protect their lives. Why don't you support Medicare for all? Universal healthcare, free at the point of service, paid for through taxation, would save about 68,000 American lives every year, over $400 billion every year, and create 1 million jobs. Why don't you support that? Why don't you support a Green New Deal? Why don't you support, you know, investing in renewable industry to fight climate change, prevent climate catastrophe, create 20 million well-paid, unionised green jobs in America over the next decade? Why don't you support that? Why don't you support tuition-free college so that every young person, every child, has a direct path towards higher education without being saddled with debt? Why don't you support abolishing student loan debt for the same reason? Why don't you support investing way more in education in America and moving to a less confrontational and much more nurturing system like Finland, which is far more successful than the US's education system? Why don't you support investing in infrastructure programs? Why don't you support investing more money in public works, in a federal jobs guarantee? Why don't you support a negative income tax? Why don't you support Sure Start centres in America? When we know the reason, don't we? The reason is it's not actually about the child, it's not actually about the baby, and it's not actually about the young adult that child will eventually become. Because American conservatives don't care about them. If they did, they'd stop sending them out to die in wars. Every single Republican in Congress right now supports continuing the war in Afghanistan, continuing the war in Iraq, and constant expanding imperialism. And let's be clear, a lot of the Democrats and pretty much all of the US corporate media do as well. If they actually cared about people, they would support things like Medicare for All, like the Green New Deal, a federal jobs guarantee, a negative income tax. They'd support making sure that every American who was working the minimum wage was getting a living wage of at least $17 an hour, because $15 is already inadequate now. It's taken so long to get it. They'd support those things. But they don't care. They don't. All this is about is appealing to a specific base of people who very strongly, for religious reasons, believe that because of the sanctity of life that you absolutely cannot ever have an abortion unless it is more dangerous for the pregnancy to go ahead for the health of the mother. Right? These are people who believe that very strongly, and these politicians and these elites and these people in the Supreme Court, they don't actually care about the child. It's just they need those people to remain in power. So they do that. Because what would they have to do in order to remain in power if they didn't do that? Well, they'd have to show that they cared about people in some other way, cared about the children in some other way. And when they're born, it's a lot trickier, because then you have to put a lot of money into education, then you have to set up sure start centres, then you have to make sure that their parents are getting a minimum wage, then you have to make sure that they can get healthcare free at the point of service, paid for through taxation. All of these things are just too far for American conservatives, for Republicans, because they don't want to have to tax the ultra wealthy more, because those are the people that pay for their luxurious lifestyle, that fund their campaigns. So now we're left with a horrific situation where in Texas, women have had a really, really essential right stripped from them. And it's a disgrace. I want to hear your thoughts, especially any of my female viewers, about this, because some of you might be better versed in American law than I am. Is there a way that Congress, or any way that this can be overturned without the Supreme Court? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It's a very, very dark day for women in Texas, and it's not as if people can just leave. I mean, there are millions of women living there, and it's incredibly difficult to just uproot your life and leave because of something like that. So life is going to be harder for a lot of people. I just hope that something gets done about this. Healthcare is a human right, and abortions are healthcare, so they're a human right. And I don't care when people say, "Oh, it's not a human right." Oh, shut up. You're in a developing country where everyone can be guaranteed healthcare, free at the point of service, paid for through taxation. Why the hell don't you support that? That's just evil. So yeah. Hopefully this will be overturned in some way or another. But Roe v. Wade is definitely on the agenda next for the Supreme Court, which is conservative dominated. The Democrats should expand the court though, in any way they can, so they can get some more progressive judges on there. Because the rights of women and working class people all around America are at stake. Thank you all very much for watching, as always, and I will see you in the next video.